Good morning, everybody, from northwest London on a chilly morning. It's a pleasure to be with you here today to discuss God's Word and learn from it. And today I want to talk about the power of example. People, as a famous American activist said, people will forget what you said, forget what you did even, but people will remember and never forget how you made them feel. This famous quote beautifully captures the essence of the power of example. Throughout history, humans have been inspired, motivated, and transformed by the power of individuals who lead by example. You see, when we see an example, a good example, that exemplifies such things as honesty, integrity, kindness, and empathy, we are more likely, and this is proven, to adapt those characteristics ourselves, to adopt those characteristics ourselves. There have been famous people, famous names, who've been an example. Famous names politically and in other ways. Today, though, we're going to talk about people in the Bible who give us an example. Now, the Bible is a book of teaching. In fact, the word Torah is used, and it means teaching. And from the Bible, we learn so many things. As you know, Orthodox Jews study the Old Testament continually and continuously to learn from it and what it means. It's their calling. But the Bible is not just about teaching. It's not a book just of teaching, because in the Bible are stories of example. And it is example that often motivates us more than teaching itself, as vital as teaching is. There are examples of determination in the Bible, dedication, perseverance, wisdom, sacrifice, and overcoming. They're all in there. These are the stories that motivate us, or certainly should. Of course, there can be bad examples as well, and they can motivate us wrongly. But they often reflect the fact that these examples are bad. When we see good, we know it. And for some reason, when we see good, it helps us follow in that example. It helps us to be good. We are social creatures. Now, this morning, I'm just going to address three people who've left us an example. I'm going to start with one sort of a hero of mine, I suppose, and it's Joseph. Remember Joseph in the Bible? He was the son of Jacob. He was highly favored, if not spoilt. He was the son of Jacob's favorite wife, Rachel. And of course, an ornate and colorful coat was made for him, the coat of many colors. He had many blessings, but he also had jealous brothers. And let's not forget, in this story, he had dreams which upset not only his brothers, but even his parents. There was a dream of sheaves of wheat bowing down before him, or bowing down before his sheaf. His brothers didn't like this. Then he had another dream of the sun and the moon and 11 stars, that's his parents and 11 brothers, bowing before him. This didn't go down very well. Can you imagine? His brothers didn't feel too good that this young one, not the youngest, but nearly the youngest, seemed to have some exalted self-image from dreams. But what happened to the man? Well, you know the story, probably. His brothers get very upset with him, are jealous, angry, and one day they grab him and they throw him down a cistern and they're going to kill him. They're so fed up with this young man endlessly reflecting specialness. They didn't like this at all. But they didn't actually kill him. They decided instead to sell him into, guess what? Slavery. Now, he was a well-educated young man, had had a favored life, loving parents, and now he's down a well, a cistern. And then they drag him out, and instead of killing him, which they'd planned to do, some of them had anyway, They sell him off to slave dealers. They were Ishmaelites, if I'm not mistaken. And he gets taken to Egypt. Things don't go too well here. He's now a slave, no independence, no freedom, and he's put into the house of Potiphar, chief of the guard. But there, he shows great responsibility and ability, and he's well favored by Potiphar, put in charge of the household, can you believe? He's a wonderful example of dedication and consistency. But of course, things go wrong. Potiphar's wife rather fancies him, and it says in the Bible that he's well-built and handsome. And she wants this well-built and handsome young man, and she follows him and pursues him regularly. Till one day, of course, she tries too hard, and he runs away, and she grabs his coat as he goes, whereupon she accuses him to her husband of trying to rape her. Well, can you imagine the response to that? He gets thrown into jail. He might have died, but he doesn't die. He gets thrown into jail. But in this jail, with God's blessing, of course, the jailkeeper hands over responsibilities to him and trusts him and depends upon him. And then, of course, you may know the next bit of this. In come a couple of people to the jail, the Pharaoh's baker and the Pharaoh's butler. They're in jail because somebody has stolen something or done some misdemeanor, and the Pharaoh is livid. And they have dreams, though. And of course, Joseph then interprets the dreams. The butler had a positive dream, let's say that, and the baker had a negative dream. And Joseph explains this to them. Well, what he explained comes to pass. So this responsible young man who'd run Potiphar's household till there was a crisis, and then run the jail, is now elevated to the understanding of what these dreams meant. Anyway, but who cares? He's still in the jail. But it so happens that the dreams came true, and the butler is elevated back to the role of giving wine and so on to the Pharaoh, whereas the baker is skewered, literally. Now, of course, Joseph says to the butler, please don't forget me when you go into Pharaoh's palace. But the butler does, and forgets about him altogether, as one does. You know, the job's over, he's safe, he's back in his job, he forgets about Joseph. And 2 years passes, a long wait. But then Pharaoh has a dream, and that dream reminds the butler of the dream that was interpreted by Joseph. And then Joseph is taken to the Pharaoh. Well, you know the story. He then ends up running the country. But he's had a long and difficult run. But he keeps going. He is consistent. He is determined. He is faithful. And he's positive. And he ends up number 2 in Egypt. What a story of an example. Somebody who'd been so elevated, and then beaten down, and then re-elevated. But it was a trial, nevertheless. And at the end of the story, of course, when the plague, the famine comes to Egypt, and Joseph's brothers and father come down to Egypt as well, Joseph says, fear not, to his brothers, because his brothers are scared stiff that he'll do something terrible to them, since they tried to kill him. Fear not, he says, am I in the place of God? As for you, you thought evil against me, but God meant it into good, to bring to pass as it is this day, to save much people alive. So he's very positive. He sees through all this trouble and strife, there was a purpose. There was a purpose. He's a big character in the Bible. Quite a few chapters cover his story. But he's a wonderful example of determination and faithfulness. The second character, though, is much smaller in its scope in the Bible. It's a micro story. It's the thief on the cross. Very small story. Luke 23, verse 39, which I have here. Ah, yes, it says. Then one of the criminals who were hanged beside Christ. Now, this is at the end. Christ is hanging on the cross, dying, as are the two thieves. One of the two criminals who were hanged beside him blasphemed Christ, saying, "If you are Christ, save yourself and us." He's saying, come on, Christ, fix it. If you're God, do something. And it says in the Bible that he blasphemed. But the other person hanging on the cross, the other thief, answering, rebuked the first one, saying, "Do you not even fear God, seeing you are under the same condemnation? And we indeed justly, for we receive the due reward of our deeds. But this man," Jesus Christ, "has done nothing wrong." Then he said to Jesus, "Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom." Now, what a contrast that is. This is the end of their lives, the last minutes or moments of their lives. And one man abuses Christ, really, and blasphemes. He saw, understandably, he's dying, by the way. He saw the dark side of everything. But the other man, astonishingly, said he saw the purpose of it all and the hope of it all. And he asked Christ to work with him and not forget him. What an astonishing difference. I've noticed in trials, even in congregations, people see either the dark side or the light side. People say, why is this happening? What's going on here? Why are we doing this? They see the negative side. Others say, well, wait a minute, this is leading somewhere good. And that's not nearly as extreme as hanging on a cross and dying. But this little micro story is an example of examples of what a famous thing. And Christ says to him, "You'll be with me in paradise." What an astonishing micro story. Totally different attitudes. One a good example and one a poor example. And these lessons stay with us. Now, the third person, though, in this trilogy of people of example, the third person is actually you. Because you are a servant of God, you follow him, and you, whether you know it or not, are providing an example to others. Have you not noticed we all observe each other? If you go to a congregation or a fellowship, we all sum each other up. You know that, don't you? Sometimes women are more keen on this than others. They examine you to see what you're about. We all examine each other. I know, for example, in one congregation or denominational area, there's a gentleman who is dying. His kidneys don't work. He's on dialysis. He's in bed for 18 hours a day. But he still is an example of faithfulness. I think of him often. I mean, we're all dying one way or the other, but this man is aware of his mortality more than most of us. He's a good example. I think of people who consistently support other people in small ways or large. It's often the small ways that count most. I know people who turn up when they don't have to turn up. They are an example. I know people who are struggling with problems, not as bad as the gentleman I mentioned, but they keep going. And you know what? We all observe this in each other. And it's a fact that if you see an example, a good example, it has an impact on how you conduct yourself, whether you have faith yourself. Say somebody's sick, like this gentleman, and you're a bit sick, you are reminded that you're not nearly as sick as he is, but that you may be sick, but that you must at least be determined in your outlook and not give in to depression or misery or unhappiness. Not run down people either. Don't run people down. Some people are uplifting. When you meet them, they are uplifting. How are you doing? Are you well? What are you doing? That's uplifting. Some people are miserable. It's just the way it is in life. And some people may have a reason to be miserable, by the way. They may have a very bad week or a very bad day or a very bad event. Just yesterday, I heard of a couple getting engaged. That's uplifting. Okay, that's not quite the same thing, but nevertheless, we all have an impact on each other. And we all have a responsibility to each other. We read in Galatians 6 that we should not be weary in well-doing. Well, well-doing may just be having a smile with somebody and asking them how they are. That's well-doing. Maybe buying them a cup of tea. That may be well-doing. Small things are what make up life. And then we read also in Matthew 5 that let your light so shine, your light, your example, so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. Well, they may not glorify him today, but by seeing your example, they are empowered themselves to be a good example. And I suppose in a way that is glorifying God. They may not even know it, but they are. So whoever you are, however great or small, and we're all small, by the way, we're all human beings with the same weaknesses, problems and frailties. Whoever you are, you can let your light so shine. Joseph's light shone, the man on the cross light shone in a time of terrible suffering, and so your light can shine. So today, think to yourself, if you have the opportunity, how can I be a good example in some small way? Something to think about, something to consider. And on this day, a day when many meet and talk on these matters, it's a great point to think about as we meet our fellow Christians. So whatever you're doing today, and I hope you have a good day, remember, let your light so shine before men